Alright guys, today's goal is to solve multi-step equations. In other words, we've solved one-step equations and they look like this. 5d equals 10, d equals 2. We've solved one-step equation, or two-step equations, sorry, and they've looked like this. 3x plus 5 equals 14, minus 5 minus 5. 3x equals 9, divide by 3, divide by 3, x equals 3. Now what we're going to do is we're going to start talking about what happens if x shows up more than one time in a problem, or y or r or z or whatever our variable is. What happens if I have one variable, but it's written more than one time? It's that simple. That's what we call multi-step equations, and I just realized there's a typo on multi-step because Kindle can't read or spell, apparently. Multi is M-U-L-T-I, not M-U-T-L-I, just clarifying there. But we're talking about multi-step equations today. The first thing I want you guys to do is go ahead and try the problem on the board. There are two different ways to solve this, at least. I can tell you that right now. In fact, now that I think about it, there might be more ways to solve it if you're willing to work with fractions. But there are at least two ways to solve this problem. What I want you guys to do is take as much time as you need. You're going to figure out one of the two ways. As soon as one person in the group, any one person in the group has figured out one of the methods, then you guys can push play again and I'll show you both methods. But do not push play until somebody has figured out how to solve this. Just a heads up guys, there is a pop quiz at the end of the video. If you don't get to it, it's your fault, not mine. Make sure you're trying this. So what I want you guys to do is when I say you're going to pause the video, you're going to work on this by yourself, with a partner, as a whole group. It's up to you, but you need to come up with one of the two ways to simplify this equation. Go ahead, not simplify, solve this equation. Go ahead and pause me now and let me know when you're ready, or push play when you're ready to move on. Alright, that should have given you guys plenty of time. Hopefully we're even hearing this tomorrow, but I'm not going to hold my breath on that just in case. There are two ways to solve this, and which way you came up with probably says a lot about how you're thinking of it. The first way is to go through and write our build and unbuild. So just like we did before, if I build this equation, then I'm going to start 1, 2, 3. I know it's 3 because if I look, I've got 1, 2, 3 distinct numbers on the same side as my x. I start with the closest one, and that was multiplied by 2. So I'll multiply 2. Then I move a little farther out. Keep in mind, between the x, between this x and this 3, we not only have a full multiplication problem, but a set of parentheses also. So that's 2 operations away, not 1. So my next closest piece is actually going to be this 5 over here. So the 5 is add 5. And then I look, and the last thing I did was I took that whole piece and I multiplied it by 3. So if I'm going to reverse this, or I'm going to unbuild it, as we like to say in my class, if I unbuild this, reverse it, break it down, get the variable isolated, solve for x, whatever you want to say, I'm going to go in the exact reverse order. So where it starts with, or where it ends with 3 down here, I'm going to start with that. And the opposite of multiply by 3 is divide by 3. The opposite of add 5 is subtract 5. And the opposite of multiply by 2 is divide 2. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to follow my method. I divide both sides by 3. Those 3's cancel and I get 2x plus 5 equals 3. I subtract 5 from both sides. Those 5's cancel and I get 2x equals negative 2. Divide both sides by 2. X equals negative 1. This is one solution method, and I went through it kind of quickly, so if you guys need to pause the video to get time to catch up, you're welcome to do so. But I did go through this kind of quickly. The reason is because this is just an extension of what we were doing before. We have an equation that was obviously built in one method. We need to unbuild it doing the exact opposite. Now let's talk about a different way to look at this. Rather than unbuild, what if I simplify? When we think back to Unit 1, we talked about simplifying a lot, and when we talked about simplifying, it covered two concepts. Mainly, the distributive property and combining like terms. So when I look at that one, I'm going to think to myself, how am I going to simplify this? What am I going to be able to do to simplify this equation? I want you guys to pause the video for a few seconds, go ahead, talk about it, decide how would you simplify this equation, and then when you push play again, I'll let you know what I'm thinking on this. Go ahead and pause the video for me. Alright, so now we're back, and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking to myself, I don't really have any like terms on the left side of my equation, but I definitely have the distributive property possible here. So I'm going to distribute that 3, and 3 times 2 is 6x. 3 times 5 is 15, equals, very important ladies and gentlemen, my distributive property stops at the equal sign. It is not a property of equality, so I don't need to do it to both sides of the equation. It is just the distributive property of the real numbers. It stops on the left-hand side. So this equals 9. Now I'm just going to solve. Subtract 15, 6x equals negative 6. Divide by 6, divide by 6. X equals negative 1. Ladies and gentlemen, we actually just went ahead and solved it two different methods. We used two methods. They're both equally valid. Let's go ahead and move on to the next problem. This one, there's really only one method to use. I want you guys to come up with it on your own. Go ahead and pause the video. Come up with how to solve this equation on your own, and then come back to me and let's see if your idea matches my idea. Go ahead and take, we'll call it 3 minutes this time. Alright, welcome back. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead, and on this one we have to simplify. There's no way that I can look at this and say, well, I just built it around one t, because I have two t's written down. That doesn't make a lot of sense. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by combining like terms. When I combine like terms, I identify them first. So I'm going to draw a triangle around my t's and a box around my 5. Remember, a number without a variable is called a constant. A variable is just called a variable. So 4 minus 3 is 1t. We do not put a 1 in front of a variable ever. So I end up with t plus 5 equals 7. Now it's pretty straightforward. I subtract 5 from both sides. T equals 2. Guys, on this one, we went back to that simplify method. Only this time, instead of the distributive property, we went ahead and we talked about combining like terms. Okay? So let's go ahead and move on to the next problem now. The next problem looks a little more complicated, and this one is because if I look at it, I have two z's, but I also have the distributive property. So how do I know what I'm going to do first? Well, first I need to look at it and decide to myself which makes more sense. Can I take this z inside the parentheses and combine it with this z outside the parentheses? Definitely not. Remember, parentheses work to separate things or to isolate them from the rest of the problem. They group things together. I can't break something out of the parentheses until I've done an operation to make sure the parentheses aren't needed anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start by distributing that 3, and 3 times 2z is 6z. 3 times 4 is 12. The 3 stops at the end of the parentheses. You see this second parenthesis back here? That tells me I am not distributing past that point because I'm only allowed to distribute into my set of parentheses. So I've got 6z plus 12 minus 4z equals 20. What I want you guys to do is go ahead and solve this from this point. Solve this from what's written in pink. Take 1 minute, solve it, make sure your answer is correct. Go ahead and pause the video and push play when you're ready to move on. Alright guys, so you should be ready to move on. I'm just going to go ahead and throw the answer up here. Make sure you've got the correct answer written in your notes. I don't want you to get it wrong. The correct answer is z equals 4. Let's go ahead and move on to the next set of problems for me. This time around, I have 3 problems I want you to do. Do these in your notes with a partner. Do these in your notes with a partner. Very important, ladies and gentlemen. I need you to practice explaining what you're doing. You don't need to write the explanation down. You do not need to write the explanation down, but you definitely need to tell your partner what you're doing as you go along. Tell them why you're doing it, tell them what you're doing, tell them why it makes sense, tell them if you have no idea what you're doing. I don't care how you say it. What I care about is you need to be explaining what you're doing to somebody. This way you can make sure that you actually understand it. Go ahead and I'll give you guys these 3 problems. They're a little longer. I'll be nice. You got 5 minutes total. Go ahead and take 5 minutes and work on all 3 of these, please. By the way, somebody pause the video for me if you haven't already done so. Alright guys, we're down to our last ditch effort here. This problem is huge, but you should be able to do it. It's the same concepts as what we've been doing all day, just exploded out. What I want you guys to do is on a half sheet of paper, don't bother about getting one out. There's a whole stack of them on the bookshelf. Just grab a half sheet of paper. On a half sheet of paper, with a partner, understand, with a partner means with one other person. You don't get to work with 12 people, you need to only work with 1. With a single partner, I want you guys to simplify this. Everybody needs to write it down. Everybody needs to write it down, but please work with a partner while simplifying it. It is due at the end of the group. Once you guys are done with it, go ahead and turn it in, and it should be getting close to time to rotate. One more time, just make sure this is turned in. It will be a grade, not a quiz, but a grade in the grade book.